Good morning. My name is Sam Bashirs. I am a member of the worship committee, and I will be leading you through this morning's service. It's been a hard week. For some of us, it may not have been as hard as some of the other hard weeks in the past year. And for some of us, it's been worse. We all have, or know someone else who has, struggled with sickness, death, insecurity about food, housing, and income. This last month has been a time of hope, with pending vaccines and new leadership, but also a time of greater fear about the ongoing and worsening pandemic and about the survival of our nation. Today's service had its origins in the loss of our dog Bingley back in August and the impact on our lives before and after. I think it's an interesting and important subject. At the same time, the loss of a dog kind of pales next to the potential loss of a country. Here, in this church, we must acknowledge what's going on and not shield ourselves from the outside world. The possible loss of a country is a lot to take on, but I hope that maybe we can bind together these two kinds of loss, one at the most personal level and one at a global level, together in one common inquiry. What does it mean to lose a dog or a country? Today we'll focus on the dog and ask what this tells us about the relationships and structures that shape our lives. Each Sunday, we begin with a land acknowledgement of the indigenous nations of this land. Wherever you are listening, please bring to mind the indigenous peoples of your place. There will be a moment of silence after the acknowledgement. We recognize and acknowledge that we gather today on indigenous land taken through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Native people and honor their commitments to survival, identity, and the protection of our world. Now is the time for our morning chalice lighting. Please join with me. We light this chalice for the interconnected web of life of which we all are a part, and for all those beings whose lives are intertwined with our own. And now please join as you're willing and able in hymn number 175, we celebrate the web of life.
Thank you.
Each Sunday, we bring joys and sorrows to share with one another. This is an important way for us to stay connected, particularly in these times when we are, for the most part, keeping separate. Please remember that you can submit your joys and sorrows each week to the email address you find on your screen. There's still time to submit one. Please type carefully so that I may honor what you wrote. Today we'll begin this time with a special message and prayer from our lead minister, Reverend Florence Kaplow.
I felt called to speak to you today in the joys and sorrows part of this service, knowing how difficult this week has been for so many. Not only the violence in Washington, D.C., the fear and anger evoked by the forcible occupation of our Capitol building, but also by the new records of coronavirus deaths across the country. I would just like to offer a prayer for all of us and for our country today. Spirit of life, Spirit of goodness and love that is in each human heart, help us here in this country at this time in our history to find a way forward without violence, without falsehood, coming together in a new shared understanding of our interconnections. May we find the courage, and our leaders find the courage to ask for accountability from all, and to remind America of the values and the ethics inherent in all of our religious traditions, inherent in what it means to be a human being. In this time of fear and uncertainty, may each of us connect with the courage and strength and love in our own hearts. May each of us do our part as members of this huge community called America, called the United States. And may this country find a way forward that will help us to come to terms with our past and move into a future of true beloved community, true democracy, as we have never known before. May all of you, as the vaccines become available, stay safe, stay vigilant, and may we continue to create community and to work for the good in the new year. Blessed be.
Good morning. I have a number of joys and sorrows that were submitted. There are some common themes running through them. From Melissa Shepline, sorrow about the loss of Lucy Scher to breast cancer. Lucy passed away this week at age 43 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Lucy was one of the two amazing Scher twins, along with her identical sister Sarah. While growing up in Champaign, she attended this church with her parents, Bob and Kyra Scher. Lucy, Sarah, and Bob participated in our 1990s Youth Week delegation to Camp Unistar. Lucy was a bright light in this world. She lived fierce and fought hard. She leaves behind a loving husband, Steve Baker, originally from Urbana, and two children, Jane and Will, ages 12 and 10, sending love to all the Scher and Baker family and friends. Also, joy for all the love and laughter that has been shared this week, remembering Lucy. May her spirit live in all of us. From Barbara Jahola, I'm greatly saddened by the death of Nan Ehrlich on New Year's Day. I will miss her friendship and her lively wit and hearing her laugh. From the Herzog family, a joy. As busy first-time puppy owners, we forgot to send in a picture and blur about our pup in time to be included in the service, and I'm sorry about that too. After decades of being cat owners, having a dog is a brand new journey for us, and it's been a wild ride these last 7 weeks. Though frustrating and exhausting at times, Benny's energy and affection has brought an added layer of deep joy and fierce love to our family, as well as a reason to slow down and just play. Certainly more good reminders and life lessons are in store for us all, thanks to this little ball of fur. Christine Cahill has a joy. Her ex-husband Bob Guinness is getting his first COVID vaccine tomorrow. My daughters and I are so happy for him and for everyone else who is getting this important vaccine. From Linda Owens, joy that our dog Olive is responding well to the treatment for her autoimmune disorder. Sorrow for the chaos that is the COVID pandemic and the political upheaval we are now experiencing. From the Pitzel family, a joy as our foster daughter has returned home. And also positive thoughts for our friend Dave, who is struggling to kick COVID. Reverend Florence Caplow is joyous with the news that her mother, Harriet McNeil, will receive her first vaccine shot on Monday. Gratitude to the thousands of scientists who work together at breakneck speed to make this possible. I will add a thanks to those who submitted dog pictures for today's service and apologies to those, like the Herzogs, whose pictures we could not include due to the logistics of combining a live and recorded service. And my heartfelt thanks to the AV folks, especially to Chris Hanauer, who helped put things together on his birthday, and Paul Weston for jumping in on short notice. Let us keep these and all the many other unspoken joys and sorrows in our hearts. And now we'll have a moment of music and reflection, followed by Jennifer Green reading an excerpt from a piece called "A Snake Bit My Cat." This might seem to be a bit of an unusual choice, but we do strive to be inclusive. I hope in the end you'll agree that we made a good choice. This is the time of the service devoted to community matters and the offering. We will begin with a video invitation to the UUCUC Coffee House. Hey there, just practicing here. Ooh, not good. Whoa. Hi, I'm Sam Bashirs, practicing a new song for the Coffee House, which is coming your way on February 14th. As you can tell, I don't quite yet have it, but I've still got time. And so have you. So get out your musical instrument, find a song, a story, a poem, dust off your tap shoes. You can even make an instructional video on the perfect golf swing. Whatever your talent, get it ready for the Coffee House on February 14th. See you there. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge that we are part of the sacred web of life, the web of our connections with each other, with the wider community, and with the world. In the spirit of these connections, we share our Sunday offering with an organization in alignment with our values. During the month of January, we will support the Eastern Illinois Food Bank with our social action offering. The Eastern Illinois Food Bank is the primary food source for food pantries, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and other programs working to feed the hungry. The food bank acquires millions of pounds of food and grocery products through purchase or donation and distributes it across a network of more than 160 feeding programs. The offering will now be received. Thank you for your generosity expressed in this and in so many other ways. We put our dog Bingley to sleep on Wednesday, August 26th. Later that day, we got a visit and a card from Reverend Florence, which offered sympathy for the, quote, dog-shaped empty place in your house, unquote. This got me wondering, what is that dog-shaped empty place? What is the shape of a dog? The pain of Bingley's departure is still fresh as I write this in early September, and the house and yard are full of reminders. His food and water bowls are where they always were, except that the food bowl is up on a small stool because in his last couple of days he couldn't bend down far enough to reach the floor. There's a bin of kibble in the kitchen that he will never eat. His collar is on the couch and his leash is hanging in the entranceway, and we have no interest in moving them. There are dog beds in the living room and in our bedroom. Bingley was a golden retriever, and his fur is everywhere in the house. It is also in the yard because recently we've been brushing him and putting the masses of fur out on the vegetables in hopes of deterring the squirrels. It didn't work. There are some big holes in my day as well. If I wasn't up by 7 o'clock when he expected breakfast, he would come to my side of the bed, and if my hand were there, would put his muzzle up under it and lift up until I lifted myself up. I usually walked him right after breakfast and as the last thing before going upstairs for the night. Some nights I walk myself because I still need to, even though we no longer have a dog. A couple of times I've carried his collar along with me. We now go out to bring in the newspapers ourselves. That was always Bingley's job, and he was very proud of himself when he learned to gather 2 papers in his mouth and come bouncing back up the steps with them. If there were passers-by, he could woof with 1 paper in his mouth, but not with 2. There's a gaping hole by the door, because when we came home, that's where he would be, and if anyone came to visit, that's where he would be. We would always get a greeting and some wags, more emphatic if we'd been away for a day or more, but never as emphatic as those he gave to our children when they came home, my brothers, selected friends, and random people on the street that he decided were special. Somewhat less often I get a reminder that my phone still hasn't quite got his name right. Texts that were supposed to be about him often refer to Bentley. Now, in December and early in the new year, I've had more time to reflect on the time our family had with him. We got Bingley back in 2011 when our first golden retriever, Budger, was getting old. Our vet said that having a puppy would be good for Budger and that Budger would help to train and socialize the puppy. This turned out well. They lived together for almost 2 years. Budger did indeed school the puppy and set a good example, and both of them were better for it. As part of our usual naming process, we went through about 500 names that were clearly no good. Eventually, Lynn thought about Jane Austen, and the answer became clear. A golden retriever could never be Darcy, but Bingley was a perfect fit. Always happy, everyone's friend, not necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed. Bingley started out as second dog. Budger was near show quality with perfect golden retriever shape and reddish gold fur that gleamed in the sunlight. In contrast, Bingley was a dull tawny color, slightly longer and narrower, and with a hip conformation that caused his whole body to sway when he walked. Worse, when he was a puppy, we read this blog post saying that a golden retriever puppy will go through a detestable stage, awkward in form and movement, before the full bloom of adulthood. We made sure to remind Bingley regularly that he was the second dog and that he was, or would be, detestable. To his credit, Bingley took none of this to heart and grew into a very attractive adult golden retriever, and in due time, as Budger passed and Bingley became our main companion, we acknowledged him as the dog. As I thought about Bingley and how he interacted with our lives, the shape grew more and more complex, like a tree with many branches. The time we spent with him, the daily interactions, his presence even when we weren't actually interacting. His impact on the budget: food, vet bills, extra fees for pet-friendly motel rooms, the time and attention he required, the logistics of traveling, the mental energy to be aware of what he needed and to make sure he was not forgotten. I lived in terror of letting him out to relieve himself on a winter night and going to sleep without having remembered to let him back in. Bingley almost never barked, and he would have quietly laid down by the back door and waited to be let in, instead of barking to let us know. There are too many branches to this shape to fit into a single reflection, and I'm just going to talk about a few of them. When you bring a dog into your life, you have to accept both the good and the bad. It's almost like entering into a relationship with a human. We got a dog who was friendly, good-looking, and a faithful companion. On walks, we would almost always be greeted by smiles, comments of, "What a beautiful dog," and requests to pet him, which were always honored. And on the downside, there was so much fur in the house that the vacuum cleaner couldn't handle it all. We had to pick up after him on walks, carefully navigate the backyard, and there were the occasional accidents that were always on the only expensive rug we owned. Bingley was the reason we had fleas in the house. The cats were never allowed out. And he was a retriever in name only. He would gladly fetch a ball or a stick, but what he found he generally kept for himself. You'd like to think what you're taking into your home is the dog, the whole dog, and nothing but the dog. Unfortunately, the dog sometimes finds a good mud wallow or something dead to roll in, or an animal carcass, preferably not too fresh, that he can pick up and bring home with him. And you have to accept that the dog is more than the sum of his parts. At times like these, some extra love and a big bottle of shampoo are essential. But still, there were many things to be grateful for. He rarely barked. He didn't chew up things he wasn't supposed to. He didn't run away or try to escape. Above all, we never had to worry about him being aggressive towards other humans or dogs. The only way he might harm someone was by knocking them over while trying to say hello. Having a dog shapes your own behavior. Dogs like to interact and demand attention. Golden retrievers like Bingley spend a lot of time lying around, so when I passed by, I would give him a pat or a thump on the ribcage and a few affectionate words. Often I wouldn't want to bend down, so I would announce it was time to step on the puppy and rub his side with my foot, which would cause him to roll over so I could get his whole belly. We did a lot of both verbal and nonverbal communicating. He knew the standard commands like sit and stay, even though he treated them as suggestions. But he also understood, go through the gate and up on the back deck, or get in the car, or when I let him out the back door, go pee-pee. On a winter midnight when it's minus 10 degrees out, this is a very useful command. When he knew he was going out for a walk, he would bow and stretch, and so I taught him before every walk to stretch and to growl when he did it. Brrr. Sometimes the growls were a little half-hearted. When we were on a walk, I would generally let him sniff or pay attention to what he wanted, but he knew I was the boss and he was always checking in to see if we'd turn or go straight for another block. I, in turn, would attend to what he was paying attention to, or as well as I could without his nose, and talk to him along the way. One thing I hated to see was a dog owner out for a walk with the dog on the leash and 95% of the owner's attention on their phone. I may have thought of other things, but I was never looking at the phone, and every so often during the walk I would stop Bingley, give him a good thumping, and tell him what a good dog he was. And then we would go on. Bingley didn't just alter the shape of my life, he expanded it. He helped me to get out of the house and outside of myself. Left to myself, I am susceptible to a wide range of petty diversions and to an equally wide range of feelings that send my thoughts inward and my moods downward. Bingley helped me stay out of all that because he needed to be walked, and especially when young, he needed as much exercise as we could give him. A large dog with too little to do can do a lot of damage, and so we went out, morning and night, and occasionally in the afternoon, generally for 1 or 2 miles. Though when he was younger and we had time, we would go for 5 miles, with me either running or riding the bike. Bingley always went on foot. I estimate that we probably went over 800 miles a year, or more than 7,000 miles over the course of his life. Physically, this saved me about 5 pounds. Spiritually, the benefits were much greater. When Bingley came to the end of his life, we had to make a decision. We had been through this before with Budger, and so we thought we were ready. Budger had been declining for a couple of years, and we had heard stories from other dog owners about how they kept their dogs alive for too long. So we made a pact that when it was time, we would not let him suffer or linger on with no real quality of life. The day came when he would not or could not get up. It was as clear as though he had told us himself. We were fortunate to be able to make an appointment with our vet and have him put down that same day. And although we were sad, we also felt good about the decision and were sure we had done the right thing. Bingley's case was much different. He was about to turn 9 years old and appeared to be perfectly fit and healthy. One Saturday he got sick. On Monday, when I took him to the vet, he seemed to be better, but an x-ray that was supposed to be just precautionary showed that his lungs were full of spots that could be either cancer or an infection, and either way he likely had a terminal illness. Tuesday night he had a great deal of trouble breathing, and on Wednesday, after a long consultation with a new vet, neither our usual vet nor the one we'd just seen could fit him in, we decided to put him down. Bingley didn't know what he was going on, but even if he had, he wouldn't have known any more than us about what was the best decision. Budger had been ready to go. Bingley still wanted to live. And we had to make a life or death decision for him, not knowing whether or not he had any chance of more quality lifetime. We had limited information, but full responsibility. We made our choice and we hoped that it was the right one, but we'll never really know. This is the responsibility of being human, to make the important decisions, whether or not we have all the information. Sometimes we have to decide who lives or dies and when. Nobody and nothing else that we know of in the universe can do this. It's not so much a matter of humans being trustworthy, because sometimes we're not. We don't always measure up. Rather, it is a matter of necessity. The decision has to be made. I think that we're often afraid to make these decisions, both as individuals and as a society. Sometimes when life or death decisions are discussed, someone says, "You can't play God," but you may have to. Not to decide is to decide. Better to accept the responsibility and do your best. There were many uncertainties in Bingley's case, but we decided that we had to keep our commitment to him, and the highest priority was to not let him suffer. We told him he was a good dog, and we let him go. As he went to sleep before the lethal injection, he looked straight into Lynn's eyes with complete love and trust. I realize that some of you may be facing decisions like these, now or in the near future. You may have a pet or perhaps a family member whose time is drawing to a close. You may need to help an older person manage a transition, perhaps to give up independent living. Or you may be deciding for yourself whether your life will go down one path and not another. Whatever decisions you may be facing, I hope you will have good support from family and friends and that you will trust in yourself. I think that's the foundation. My own family and I are going through this now with my father. He's 92 and he's been sliding into dementia for a while. But it's not a steady or straightforward thing and no clear lines are crossed. We're sure now that he won't ever get better, and yet some days and some times are better than others. On Christmas Eve, we were surprised and pleased by the joy with which he joined in singing carols. There are still ways to connect, but you have to find the right buttons to push, and they don't come with labels. The shape of a dog is a complex branching and interweaving of our lives with his, some places just lightly touching, some pressing up against one another and forcing each of us to accept some things that were some changes in our own shape, and in others penetrating deep into our hearts. Of course, there were parts that were completely separate. Bingley wasn't much for intellectual pursuits, and he was not at all up on current events, while for us, the whole world of doggy encounters and friendships and how to make sense of it all through our noses was completely closed. But the ways in which he did alter the shapes of our lives were many, often profound, and mostly unplanned. I never thought about these things while Bingley was alive. It is only in retrospect and prompted by Florence's poetic condolences that I began to see how he shaped our lives and, like footprints in the mud, the many places where the shape lingers after he's gone. I hope this will move you in some way to think about your own life and how you shape it. I hope you will be intentional about it. If possible, include a dog. Our closing words are a poem by Mary Oliver called The Poetry Teacher. Thank you for joining us today. We extinguish our chalice with these shared words written by Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.
May we all be able to connect with our own courage and strength and spirit of playfulness as we move forward from this traumatic week.